Hi, my name is Robin Dowden.
And
I was born in Ottumwa, Iowa on October 9th, 1942, 78 years ago. I grew up in Des Moines and went to school there. I went to two high schools. I went to Roosevelt High School in Des Moines, Iowa until I was till I was a senior. And my senior year, we moved to Raton, New Mexico, and I graduated in 1961 from Raton, New Mexico.
where did you go to school after that?
After that, I went to college. Uh, First, I went to Pueblo Junior College in Pueblo, Colorado, which I think is now Colorado State. I'm not sure what it's called now. And then after that, because I sort of followed my boyfriend there, and after that, I went to school in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and studied psychology there. And then I got bored with that and went to school in Clarksville, Tennessee, where my brother was in the service. He was a paratrooper, and he was a West Point graduate, so I dated a lot of lieutenants. And after that, I decided that school wasn't for me, and I was going to join the airlines. I was 21 when I decided to become a flight attendant. You had to be 21 in order, because you served liquor, and in order to do that, you had to be 21 years old to do that. So I waited till I was 21, and off I went to Des Plaines, Illinois, United Airlines flight school, and graduated there. I think it was in September.
What was the school like?
It was like a regular classroom. You met. I think school started like at 8:30 and went till like 4 o'clock. You had homework. We had to learn all the airports, all the uh, capitals, all the states. You had to know where each state was. So a lot of focus was on the country and where United flew, the rules and regulations. You had to check in every morning and weigh in, and then they focused on your hair and your weight and your wardrobe. Um, Basically, that was it. You learned about the aircraft, and one of the most fun thing that I had in school there was when they took us out on a training exercise, and we went up in the aircraft, and they took us through simulations of danger, and they would do a dive. I remember this explicitly. We went into a dive, and all the compartments opened up, and the pillows flew, the blankets flew, everything flew forward, and it was to expose us to what would happen if that happened, if it went into a dive. So that was a great fun. And then when we landed, we they opened the doors and we slid out onto the tarmac in the chutes that opened up. And then also we exited through windows and went out on the wings of the aircraft and jumped down to train us to get used to whatever would happen. And then we learned food service, how to handle the trays, how to speak, how to sit, how to basically become familiar with the aircraft and with working working the aircraft. Because basically, what a flight attendant or a stewardess, as they were called back then, what they are really assistants to the captain. They're not just there to be a waitress. They're there in case of an emergency, and so we are basically trained for the emergencies and to make your flight happy. When we graduated, they posted where you were going, and I and two of my roommates, we ended up in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Ypsilanti was the capital for Capital Airlines, or was the not the capital, but the hub for Capital Airlines, which United had just purchased. So off we went to Ypsilanti, and what you did was every month you bid on flights. They would come out with schedules and you bid on them, and according to your seniority, you would receive your schedule. So I didn't have any seniority at that time. So my first flight, I think, was probably from Ypsilanti to Wisconsin. Not very glamorous, but it was fun. And every month you went someplace different if you got your bid, what you wanted to do. I never really got to California or any of those places because I didn't have the seniority to do that. But it was fun nevertheless. A typical day would begin, well, I remember where I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we flew out of Ypsilanti, which was like 40 minutes away. So I'd get up in the morning, get in the car, drive to the airport, check in, check my weight, check my hair, check my uniform, get okayed by the director there, and then board the aircraft, check all the exits, check my food, service, make the coffee, and then wait for the guests to arrive. So they would come on board and you would greet them, take their tickets. We took their tickets back then. And I have a very special memory of one time this man came on board and his name was Jack Bean. Now, at the time, or Mitzi Gaynor was a big star at the time, and her husband's name was Jack Bean. Now, I don't know if this was her husband or not, but I knew, because I followed her, I knew her husband's name was Jack Bean, and this guy comes on. So I welcomed him, and the next day he came back, and I recognized him, and I said, "Hello, Mr. Bean." Well, I just made his day by knowing who he was, and I've never forgotten that. That was like one of the highlights that I had. You had to watch your weight very carefully.
Was there a reason?
Yes, because you were a symbol for the airline. You represented the airline, and in those days, you couldn't get away with it today, but in those days, you had to be a certain weight, a certain height, and everybody looked alike. So that was something that you had to watch and control. And if you didn't, if you were overweight, you didn't fly, even by a pound or so. They were strict about it.
What was your uniform like?
I'm not sure who designed it. I think it was Pierre Cardin. It was a big deal at the time because he was one of the big designers. So it was blue, and we had a little hat. I think we had a hat. Yeah, a little hat and a white blouse, and it was very tailored, and the skirts were kind of long. And I still have my wings. It have my name on it.
So the only men that you worked with were the pilots?
The pilots, yeah. And they were very respectful. They did their job. If we had an overnight, every hour that we flew, we had 2 hours on the ground. So, like if I flew from Ypsilanti to New York, I would have a layover because it would be like a 4-hour flight. If there was a stop in the way, so they would put us up at a hotel in New York, and usually it was very nice. You'd go to dinner with the captains, go back to your room, get up early in the morning, the car would take you to the airport, and you would go back. So that was fun. That was a lot of fun. And one of the things that I remember now that we're talking about, like flying to New York, was there's a thing called deadheading. And what that is you fly an empty plane to get it to a destination so that they can fill it up and fly back. So I boarded the plane, and I think it was a Caravel, which is one of the early jets. And we flew, and it was at night, and the Aurora Borealis was out, and I saw that. I was up, the captains invited us up to the aircraft because we didn't have any passengers, so we could go and sit in the jump seat up there with the captains and fly, and the sky was just this light with greens and reds, and it was gorgeous. a beautiful time. My favorite place was probably going to New York, but I didn't get to go that often. And Philadelphia. I remember going to Philadelphia. I have kind of a funny story about Philadelphia. Um, when you get to the airport, there's a room that the pilots and that the air people go to. I guess air people, stewardesses and the flight attendants and the pilots. There's a room that you go to, so you're separate from the public. And I had just purchased some Estee Lauder perfume. I don't know if this is gonna fly, but it was their musk. So I'm in there and I spray myself with my new perfume, and I go into the room, and the captain comes in. He says, "My God, it smells like a whorehouse in here." Well, I just turned bright red, and I slunk into my chair, and I've never forgotten that. That was pretty embarrassing. You know, everybody was usually in a good mood traveling. Back then, it was a lot different. It was not everybody traveled, and when you did, you got dressed up. You wore a suit, you wore a dress, you wore heels. People were in a good mood. They were pleasant, and you had a lot of fun. It was a good time. I would highly recommend it to either any male or female if you really enjoy people. That it's a good profession to go into. My favorite part of the job, I think it was being on board and greeting the people and waiting on them and serving them and listening to them, and the kids, getting them up to the pilot, getting them little wings. The kids were just beautiful about that. They enjoyed their wings and seeing the pilots. I stopped being a flight attendant because after a while I wanted to stretch my wings, so to speak. I wanted to get out of Ypsilanti, Michigan. That was basically it. And I could see that I wasn't going to get out there for a while because of the lack of seniority that I had. So that's when my two roommates and we all decided that we were going to leave the airline and go out into the world and try something else.
And when did you stop?
I stopped in I think it was 1964, 63, 64. I don't remember. It's so long ago. I don't know the dates.
What did you do after?
After that, we went to, the three of us, we were pretty close. We went to Salt Lake City, where one of my roommates was from, and we went to work in a bank. So that was different. I'd never worked in a bank before. So the three of us worked in a bank. Two of us worked in the same bank, and then one worked in a bank down the street. And so we spent some time there, and then we split up. My one roommate went back to Washington, the state of Washington. The other one stayed in Utah, and I went to California, where I used my my skills as a flight attendant to become a waitress at the Steak and Shake. And that was great fun. Had a great time doing that.